So what this is this is a history of the United States. And essentially, there's going to be several parts to this, but this is going to be the prison population here by the year and by the president here. These are going to be civil rights fighters who fought for your civil rights. This is your lynching graph. These are a bunch of historical figures in here. And then up in here is your Supreme Court case precedent of the three branches of government, the founding philosophies, Locke, Rousseau, Montesquieu, the founding fathers down here. And then, let's get into it a little bit, because this is really a learning tool. If you have my digital poster, which is essentially my brain threw up on a wall, and the things I studied over my life and things I learned, I just threw them on a wall, because this is what I know. And what it does, though, is it gives you a very good base for understanding law and rule of law and what rule of law is supposed to mean, and Constitution in America. And let's get right into it. So the reason why I always tell people to get the digital one is because there's so much information on here. And if you can print it out, and I like printing it out too, but on the digital one you can really zoom all the way in to see the list of the presidents, and you don't lose any resolution. Where on the wall printout, I don't have very good eyes anymore. So this is, and this is a list of all the presidents going all the way back to George Washington, and the very first president. There's Georgie pudding pie, had a wife. Anyway, so then George Washington all the way down, and what years they were president, what their party representation was, and as you go all the way down, I think this one's going to end at Joe Biden. I'm pretty sure. I know it does. But anyway, but if you have these on your wall, or if you study these, then Grover Cleveland, one of my favorite presidents, and also a man who, had some flaws, I guess you would say, for today's era, to stay politically correct, I guess. But then what? And then what? Now what happens? See, now the president's years are going to be different than these years. But what these years are going to do, and this timeline is a little bit different too. As far as like in a line with this, these timelines don't necessarily match up, but they do different things. This is the lynching graph here. Now, here's the thing about the lynching graph: because you can zoom so far in on the PDF, this is going to be, these statistics are undisputed, so you can really get into it. But in 1882, you had 64 white people lynched and 49 black people lynched. And then white people lynched, black people lynched, white people lynched, black people lynched. And then, what I did when I was learning the lynching graph is I would go into the 11 lynchings of white lynchings in 1890 and research who was lynched in 1890 that was white. Who, of the 85 black people who were lynched, how many? I look in 18. You can research it, and then the things you find out are just staggering. It's interesting when you just start to do the research. Just start to dig in. Here's your lynching graph. In 1899, 21 white people were lynched and 85 black people were lynched. It's interesting to find out their stories. It's riveting, to be honest with you. What was it? The 2000. What was it? The one that really got in my head. 1911. Was it 1911 Perry Race riots? So it was called the 1911 Perry Race riots, but that's not what it was. Was it 1921 Perry? I think 1921 Perry Race riots. 1911 or 1921. God bless America. Okay, so I don't have a photographic memory. I'm not perfect. But you can look up the Perry Race riots. And I did it because I just wanted to know who was lynched and how they were lynched. 1921. Who was lynched? How'd they get lynched? And then, then you have things here on the graphic that are, if you learn these, you'll have a real better, sorry about if you know Kerr versus California, if you know the case precedent, you can look it up on lyays.org, and there's Terry versus Ohio, Officer Safety, the Controlled Substance Act. If you just know what these things are, but the big ones are like, Mapp versus Ohio, that creates the fruit of the poisonous tree doctrine, where people can't come the cops can't come into your house without a warrant. But then, did you know the 1963 case of Kerr versus California? It just upends that whole thing. It just changes it. Sorry. All they have to do on Kerr versus California is just knock, knock, knock on your door. And learn the Supreme Court cases. What is Kent versus Dulles? What did that case do for us? What was it? This case makes it so that you can travel outside the United States and they can't keep your passport because of Kent versus Dulles. I may be mispronouncing it because I'm not classically smart. Someone said look this up and read it, and I did. Right? I think it's not true, actually. I think this just came along in the studies. As I was reading another case, it will refer you to other cases. When you read Kent versus Dulles, you will read other cases that it refers you to. But if you know it, then you know that this is your right to leave the United States. They can't revoke your passport because of your political positions. So that comes directly from Kent versus Dulles. And this was the first, not the first, major police protest in Dijon versus Oregon. And this is based on, I think it was socialism or communism. But the point is you should know this case. You should know what it is. It's important. Olmstead versus United States. Olmstead versus United States is where the cops are being, prosecuted for distributing alcohol, selling alcohol. Olmstead's a lieutenant in the Seattle Police Department. You should know the case. And then, the thing is that you have to know Carroll versus United States. You have to know the case. This is what allowed cops. So Carroll versus United States, just so you know, when you have the digital poster yourself, that creates the 1925 Carroll case creates exigent circumstances, and these are the exigent circumstances. That if the police think there's going to be a loss of life, or if the police say they're in hot pursuit of you, or if the police say they have to seize evidence off of you, then they can use the automobile exclusionary rule, and you lose your rights. So anytime the cops think there's going to be a loss of life because the FBI is poisoning alcohol bottles and people are dying from drinking alcohol, so now everything's a loss of life situation. And this is based off the 1925 case of Carroll versus United States called the Carroll Doctrine. You can look at, and then it creates these three factors for police and how they can just circumvent your rights if they have the belief of any of these are happening. So, and the 1925 automobile exclusionary rule is directly from Carroll, where it says that the cops can search your car without a warrant if they're looking for alcohol. They think that they're looking for bootleg alcohol or your transport. It's crap. It's no longer a relevant thing, but they're still using the same thing to search your car today. That's just the reason why they can search your car. And then now the years up here. Listen, I told you I'm not a graphic designer. If you can do it better, don't say you think you can. Okay, if you can actually do it better, we can talk. But this is my work and my buddy's work, and we put a lot into this. So I'm not great, but I'm good. Okay, anyway, so these years up here, when you're looking up here, these years correlate down here with the prison population. So you can see that in 1920 going down, we're looking at, and this is the reason why I have the digital poster again. You're looking at, 40,000 people in prison in 1920, and these little thin lines equal 100,000 people each. And then, of course, you have 100,000 people in the mid-20s here, because Prohibition starts in 1920, and that's going to correlate, I promise, because I made this. And then right here in the middle of Prohibition, we've doubled the prison population, and we're halfway through, and then we double it again before Prohibition ends in 1933. And this is the beginning of a true industrial prison complex, and you know the reason why. I just showed you the reason why. How come that is? Because the 1928 case of Olmstead versus United States, you had to put those cops in jail. You couldn't kill them. You couldn't lynch them. Not a lot of black bootleggers were there. Because you go down here, and you go down to 1928, not right here, 1920, we're looking right here, 1921, 1920. So this is when people would have been lynched for getting involved in the alcohol game if they got caught bootlegging by anybody who's competing in alcohol. You could be lynched just because, you got to think about that. You got to think about it. And so it correlates. Everything correlates. And then what I did a lot is I would correlate the year of a law, the year of the lynchings, and who was in power, what president was in power, what party was in power. Sorry about that. My thing froze up, it looks like. So, the 1952 Boggs Act, do you know what that is? It's a drug act where they can put you in jail. At Brinegar versus United States, this is where they can warrantlessly enter your home. If a man of reasonable caution has reasonably trustworthy information that there's crime going on in your house, he can just enter into your house. Brinegar's deadly. And not a lot of people know about Brinegar. United States Supreme Miller is going to uphold gun laws against us by the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, well, who's the Supreme Court? The Supreme Court just depends on, who was appointed into power. Who was appointed into power. And these are all the Supreme Courts. So you can look up each one of those courts and see who was on them and what they did. What is the Roger Taney Court famous for? What are they famous for? The Taney Court? They're famous for what? The Dred Scott case of 1857, which causes a civil war. Civil War right here. 1861 to 1865 is a civil war. And this is how, we lost the soul of America with Johnson versus McIntosh, with the spirit of America with Martin versus Hunter's Lacey. Martin versus Hunter's Lacey is going to say that the Supreme Court's going to be the only people who are going to get to hear civil rights cases. And Johnson versus McIntosh, you're not going to be able to sell your land if you're a Native American because you don't own it anymore. The federal government owns it. Only the federal government can sell the property. And so then that violates the very principles of John Locke's natural law. It violates the very principles. What are you talking about? And then Marbury versus Madison, as you know, it's a double-edged sword. It gives a lot of power to the Fed, to the courts, and at the same time, it gives us judicial review, but really is going to boil down to 9 unelected personnel. I mean, and if you go down the history of these courts and you research these courts, you're going to find out the people on them really weren't that great. I mean, I'm just telling you. For example, William Howard Taft, both president and Supreme Court justice, I guess you would call him, if you would call a man who was president of the Philippines from 1799 to 1803 or something like that, because he's going to be president a little bit after that. And then he's Supreme Court justice from 1921 to 1930. And, I want to keep this positive. I want to stay in a good mood, but no, not a good guy. You may think William Howard Taft was some great dude. He absolutely was not. I got a picture of him on here. He is not a great dude. William Howard Taft? No. If you go back throughout the history of time, Taft is right there. Taft was so he did bad things in the Philippines. He did real bad things, war crimes that you don't even know about, that you've never heard about. William Howard Taft, that's what he did. Hendrick versus Maryland is what gives every state in America the right to create traffic laws where you live. And they've taken it too far, haven't they? Haven't you become a piggy bank? Yes, you have. You sure have. Sinek versus United States, Charles Sinek and his wife Elizabeth Bayer, they're going to be arrested for handing out pamphlets that say, resist, do not go to war. Slavery was abolished. You don't have to go to war. Arrested, charged. All these cases are based on race. Lone Wolf versus Hitchcock, Barrera versus Kentucky, Barrera College versus Kentucky, Lum versus Rice, Corrigan versus Buckley. All these are based on race. Giles versus Teasley, based on race. All racist laws. All of these are racist. Every one of them. And it's incredible. Lum versus Rice. Martha Lum wants to go to school in a white school. And I'm so sorry. I just said it, didn't I? William Howard Taft. What does he say? William Howard Taft says, if Lum wants to go to school in Bolivar County, Mississippi, she can go to school in a colored person's school. Lum versus Rice, right here. This is William Howard Taft. He's the one who wrote the holding. I just told you what a peach of a man he was. Martha Lum would just want to go to school. She had to go to a colored school, is what he said. Barrera College versus Kentucky. This is upholding. Barrera College versus Kentucky can only happen with Plessy versus Ferguson. Plessy versus Ferguson is what is going to allow racial segregation, legal racism. As you go back in time, racist laws are going to get more and more racist. But Barrera College versus Kentucky is where the college says, hey, you can't be educating colored kids here because we educate white kids in the school. And they said, but we educate them at different times. And they said, no, they can't sit in the same desks. They can't sit in the same desks. They can't. And then Kentucky wins. And Barrera College is segregated, which it was never segregated before. So, Lone Wolf versus Hitchcock, this is where we stole the Native Americans' land that we gave back to them in a treaty. I mean, our history is not fantastic when it comes to Supreme Court law. I mean, the sun shines on a dog's butt once in a while. Cats versus United States. This is Cats versus United States. This is what's supposed to make your effects, your phone, your cell phone, your communication, is supposed to make it secure. I don't think that's really true anymore. I think they're getting our phones anyway through the NSA and doing whatever they want with our phones. Because Cats versus United States, just so you know, if you go back here, that's what's going to upend Olmstead versus United States. Olmstead versus United States, they just tapped into his phone. Roy Olmstead, J. Edgar Hoover. He should be right down here. Oh, I'm glad we came down here just so I can kind of give you guys a rundown of what's down here so you understand it if you get the digital poster. All these are, you should have to look these people up. You should have to look them up. You should have to look up everybody here. I shouldn't tell you who everybody is. So you have to actually spend the time and look them up because they're all researchable. All these faces are so easy to find. He's so easy. He stands out. Oh my God. Just so you know, just research people who died in these years right here. From 1958 until 1967, 68. Because towards the end, and see, when the lynching chart ends, right, this is when the prison system is going to kind of have the opposite shape. You can see it. You can see it. So, but no, what I want to talk about though, because I can get into all these different civil rights activists. Right down here though, right here, see these right here? These are the 1967 riots, but they're not riots. If you actually research each one of these riots, they're called the Newark riots. They're called the Saginaw riots, but they're not. Just research each one of them, and you'll find out they mislabeled them. They should be called the massacres or the tyranny of America. But because it was really mostly happening to black people, it wasn't labeled properly. Because right now what we're seeing in our country is tyranny by the cops hurting and killing people. But they just did it to blacks back here. They just did it to black people right back here, whether we like it or not. And then on this, it should be a blue line, but we ended up making it a star line. Sorry. You have the 1931 Wickersham Commission that's available on Delete Lawz for free for download. You don't have to pay anything. You just download it. And then you have the 1972 Knapp Commission. I'm not going to tell you anything else. I'm just going to make you look it up. And then you're going to have the 1994 Mullen Commission signed by Bill Clinton. These are riveting. They're all on the website. You can get them on the website for free. The 94 Crime Bill, these attach these three things here. The 94 Crime Bill has the COPS program in it and also has Operation Relentless Pursuit. And so then I'll let you look these things up. But the COPS program is Community-Oriented Policing Services. It's a joke. Community-oriented. There's nothing community about it. And then there's just so much information. All of these are Supreme Court cases. If you just take the time and you research these cases, you are going to learn so much. You have no idea. There's a reason why I put every single case on here. And just so you know that I'm not a partisan, I'm not a Democrat or Republican. Which one of these people do you think I celebrate? Ready? Which one do you think I celebrate? Neither. They're the same. These two are the same. If you don't know Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Scalia, these guys are the same. They're elitist, appointed, total frauds. They worked together when they had to. for Reich versus Gonzalez, right here, Gonzalez versus Reich, where they kept marijuana illegal, whereas he voted against it on Morrison. He voted against it on Lopez, the principles of law. And then here he said, oh, no, we're not using that principle of law. We're using this principle of law, so I'll vote for it. And she voted for it. But she voted against these two because they weren't really that quite as important as keeping marijuana illegal. Arizona versus Johnson, you got to get out of the car if you're the passenger in a car if a prudent man believes you could be armed and dangerous. And who's that prudent man? The cop. The cop says you're armed and dangerous because you're the passenger in a car. You need to get out of the car. You just have to know your rights. You have to understand all these cases. Gosh, bling it. I was watching about that. He does a timeline here of the cop breakdown. Really like it. I like knowing what happened. 96, Wren, pretextual stops. Sitz versus Michigan State Police, DUI checkpoints. So anyway, all right, I'm going to get the flock out of here. Listen, get this poster. Oh, it's available on DeleteLawz.com. Go to DeleteLawz.com. You're going to learn so much. Oh, and I didn't go over the Fourth Amendment. I'm going to do one more thing here. The Fourth Amendment is the right of the people. The Fourth Amendment is as important as all the other amendments, of course, but the Fourth Amendment has special meaning to me and you. That's why it's the bottom of the whole poster. Because the Fourth Amendment is the right of the people. It's our right. You and our. And what is exactly our right? The Fourth Amendment, the right of the people to be secure in their person, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. And we've lost it. We don't have any of those things. None of them. You're not secure in your persons. A cop can grab you anytime he wants. You're not secure in your house. There's 100,000 raids a year. You're not secure in your papers. They can just search them. Your effects are subject to the NSA and every other agency that wants to search your phone or confiscate your phone. We've lost the very beginning of it. It shall not be violated. It's not only violated, it's impaled. So then as we go here, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation. So no warrant shall issue. We know what that means. That a warrant is jail. But upon probable cause. So probable cause where you broke the law. No warrant unless you break the law. No warrant unless you break the law. Supported by the victim. Supported by oath or affirmation of the victim. So no warrant shall issue unless the law has been broken, and that's supported by the victim. By oath or affirmation. That's how that works. Is that what's going on now? No, with Terry versus Ohio, the cop is now the victim, and he swears he's suspicious of you. And then right here, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. Particularly describing. So in other words, no warrant shall issue, but upon a law being broken, sworn by oath or affirmation, it was in this thing, this particularly describing, that's not what's happening. They're just doing whatever they want. And then the person to be seized is, you can be seized now because someone's called and said you pushed him. He pushed me. Is there any evidence of that? No, but he pushed me. Okay, what are we going to do with him? Put him in the dungeon. And then I can't walk out without talking about Terry versus Ohio. So just take a look at the correlation here. Just take a look. Ready? So maybe you can see it, maybe you can't. But there's Terry versus Ohio. And these years, the years here match up with the cases, and the big years right here match up with the cases, and they match up with the prison industry. And there's Terry versus Ohio. Goes straight down, and that's when the prison population takes up like a rocket. You don't got to be a rocket scientist to see that. You can see it. Terry versus Ohio is right at that niche right there. That's when it takes off. There's Terry right there. There it is. There's Terry versus Ohio, and there's the takeoff. Why is that? Because this is what allows cops to run up and grab you if they're suspicious of you. So then it takes off like a rocket, and we could go over. I could keep going all night, but listen, I gotta get the flock out of here. But do me a favor, go by Delete Lawz and pick this up. And then if you have any questions about anything on here, don't hesitate to hit me back and say, "Yo, who's this right here?" Right? If you can't figure it out, I bet you can. It would be a fun game to play with the kids as well if you actually engage with the kids and played with them a little bit. If you have any kids, if there's any kids around, if not, make some kids. God bless you guys. God bless the United States. I love what we stand for. I love the ideals of what we stand for. I'm a man that's for rule of law. You are entitled to every single one of your first 10 amendments and the amendments created after, even though we could do without the 16th Amendment. Anyway, listen, and by the way, all your amendments are across the top of this as well. You can see them. You see they're here. Civil Rights Act, the big things come across here. There's your 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, and they slide on top. Okay, I'm going to get out of here. I got to go. Love you guys. Later, Gator.